No.
And then Aaron, are you able to give me co-host privileges as well, real quick?
Yes, I can.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to begin in just a minute. Welcome to tonight's meeting. We'll start in just a minute.
Test, 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 test. Test, test.
Al programa de SSMP.
Test. Sound check 1, 2. Sound check.
Welcome.
Apaga el micrófono.
Sí.
Yep.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming down. I just want to invite you down to take a seat. There's some snacks on the back as well. Feel free to have a seat and snack on what's available on the back. Just want to welcome everyone. Thank you for making it to Cali Patriot High School tonight. And we're about to get started. Just wanted to get thumbs up on Zoom, making sure that we're getting good audio with our translators. We're good to go. Victor, are we good to go? Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started for tonight. We'll start with, first, again, welcome you, each and every one of you for coming down. Those that are joining us over Zoom, I know there's some volume on this mic on the remote, or the virtual area, so hopefully that gets squared away before we start with our slides and our presentation for tonight. Just want to go over some quick logistics with you on the site. Like I said before, we got snacks in the back. There's water, there's coffee, there's decaf coffee as well. The restrooms are right in the middle behind us. Both restrooms are available. We also have an emergency exit to the back will be your right, and the main entrance and main exit on your left as well. Okay, and if you grab an agenda, you'll see or notice a slight change on our first presenter. Fernanda from Comité Cívico. Unfortunately, she won't be able to be here with us today, so you'll see a slight change on that first item. And the purpose for this meeting tonight is to provide you all and those joining on Zoom with an update on the Solvency Management Program, the restoration efforts happening around the sea, what's going on out there with our acreage goals, how many projects are going on. You'll hear more about that on our presentation tonight, and also other efforts that are happening simultaneously on the SSMP program. So just we'll have a Q&A period after every item. You see we have 5 or 6 items for you tonight, so we'll have a Q&A for each of them, and we ask you to keep those questions within the topic at hand. But we also going to have a public comment period at the very end for any other questions or comments you might have. Okay, and with that, I just wanted to we could another thumbs up if we have good sound on the virtual space. Yeah, cool. Okay, well, with this, I'll if we can bring the next slide, I'll just briefly go over the logistics for the remote setting. Next slide, please. Okay, like I mentioned before, this is a hybrid meeting. We also have that Zoom option available. And just that for those that are joining us remotely, as you might know, there are some instructions for you to participate on Zoom. So there's also interpretation available both in person and in Zoom. For those joining us over Zoom, there's an icon down below where it says interpretation. Click there and you'll select your language of preference. If it's English or Spanish, and I suggest you hit the mute original audio option. Otherwise, you might be hearing the 2 languages at the same time. And I'll briefly mention this in Spanish. Para quienes nos acompañan en el espacio virtual en Zoom, hay una opción para seleccionar el lenguaje en español. Tenemos esa opción disponible aquí en persona, en la escuela de Calipatria, en la biblioteca, y también en el espacio virtual en Zoom. En la parte de abajo hay una barra de opciones donde puede hacer clic en el botón de interpretación o interpretation si está en inglés. Selecciona su lenguaje y hay una opción que dice silenciar audio original o mute original audio si está en inglés. Y apiar que no puede escuchar los 2 idiomas al mismo tiempo. Para quienes nos acompañan en persona y necesitan interpretación, en la parte de atrás hay unos dispositivos auditivos para que usted pueda hacer uso de ellos y recibir interpretación simultánea. En la presentación de hoy va a ser generalmente en inglés. Entonces, si usted necesita esta presentación en español, le sugiero tome uno de estos dispositivos o en Zoom seleccione el lenguaje en español. If we can hit the next slide, please. Okay, so with this, I'll kick it off to my colleague, Ricardo, if we can join us for this item. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ricardo. I'm with the Comité Cívico del Valle, and like Miguel mentioned earlier, Fernanda won't be able to make it today. She's feeling under the weather, so I'm just taking over her spot for the day. Next slide. Next slide. So first off, we're going to start a little bit with the historical context of the sea, of how it started. 1905, a canal breach that was used to divert water to the Imperial Valley breach and diverted a lot of the water into the Salton Sea, which is the remnants of the dried up Lake Cahuilla. It filled up over 2 years. Crews lost control of the Swollen River that overflowed its banks, and it couldn't be contained. Next slide, please. Here we see a little bit of the Salton Sea at its heyday. During the 50s and the 60s, it was a very popular place. People would come to spend their vacation, enjoy the oasis in the desert. They had access to resorts, restaurants, water sports of all sorts, and even artists like Frank Sinatra and the Beach Boys came to spend their free time here. Next slide. So the Salton Sea also functioned as an important stop along the Pacific Flyway for migrating birds on their trip north for the winter. It acts as an essential beacon, as a place to rest for their journey and a source of food. But farm runoff and less water from massive water transfer in the early 2000s brought some of the larger problems people associate with the sea today. Rising salinity, fish die-offs, and the rapidly receding sea and explosive by. Next slide. Next slide. Over the years, many groups have been created to bring awareness and educate the communities about the events happening at the Salton Sea and the efforts now underway to restore habitat and ecological balance, and efforts to help restore the Salton Sea and educate our communities. Comité Cívico del Valle created the Salton Sea Community Outreach Education and Engagement Program to bring awareness to the state of the Salton Sea, educate about air quality and its effects on public health, ensure an understanding of ecology, integrate environmental education, and to encourage and engage in civic participation. Along with that, with the help of the Ivan Air Monitor Network throughout Imperial and Coachella Valleys, we created the School Flag Program, a color-coded air quality initiative that allows campuses a warning system to better inform their students and staff of environmental conditions. And we have a resource table up front if you guys need more information on that. And yeah, that's it.
Right on. Thank you, Ricardo. And next up, I have my colleague Mario Llanos, who will be speaking about the project updates for Salton Sea Management Program.
Thank you, Miguel. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and those of you online for joining us today in this meeting on our Salton Sea Management Program community meeting. I wanted to give just a quick overview and a brief talk briefly about our program. Mostly give a project update, but just kind of give an overview of our program here. So just next slide, please. So just at the highest level, the Salton Sea Management Program remains focused on and committed to the following priorities. That's implementing the Salton Sea Management Program Phase 1 10-year plan, which will go through 2028. And then strengthening partnerships and engagement, which we have really taken a big stride on this year in multiple efforts of reconvening our science committee and our community engagement committee and a long-range plan committee and updates just like this in the Salton Sea Management Program update. And we've had over 30 meetings this year alone, which has been the most engagement that we've had, I think, in the history of this program. So we really striving to engage the community and get feedback and input for our projects. And then finally, just continuing to build the Salton Sea Management Program team and deliver on our commitments to the Salton Sea. Next slide, please. So this is very word heavy, and these slides will be on our website, so I'm not going to read through everything, but I just really wanted to, again, I just talked about strengthening partnerships. These are just key accomplishments at the Salton Sea that our program is very proud of. And again, I talked about the engagement that we've been conducting over the past year and how we've really engaged the community and our partners around the sea. So just getting into our accomplishments here, completing over 1,200 acres of temporary dust control in 2020 and 2021. Currently, we have 6,000 acres of major project work underway and additional 8,000 acres of projects planned through 2024. And then in January 2021, we broke ground on our largest restoration program or project, which was the SEH project, which I'll talk a little more about later, which is 4,100 acres at the south end of the sea. And then this year especially, we really advanced with our partners, several other community-oriented restoration projects around the sea, which I'll also talk a little more about in my presentation. And then started an important veg enhancement project in late 2021, really beginning of this year. We really kicked that off, which is 1,700 acres across 3 sites around the sea. Next. So we've secured an additional, as the state secured an additional $220 million in funding through 2024 for these projects that I'm going to be talking about. And in addition, we recently are anticipating another $250 million coming from the state, from the federal government to support Salton Sea efforts. And with that is an agreement and commitment by key landowners around the sea to expedite land access agreements, which is very important to our program and making sure that we get projects on the ground. Also, important progress was made this year on our NEPA EA document, our environmental analysis, which is an environmental analysis of our 10-year plan. That is expected to be completed. I'll talk a little more about that later, but that's expected to be completed at around March of next year. And that's going to enable programmatic permitting to get work under our 10-year plan moving a lot faster. And then you'll hear a little more today about the development of our long-range plan, and I'll save that for that presentation. Next slide, please. So I won't spend too much time here, but like I said, land access is critical to our project timelines and completion, and making sure we get land access and water for projects is very key in implementing projects around the sea. Next slide. So this is just a map of our ongoing projects. You'll actually see this on our 10-year plan, NEPA EA. And as you can see from the map, there's many projects that are planned or underway, and I'll highlight some of those as I move on here. Next slide, please. First off, I'll start with our species conservation habitat project, which is a $206.5 million project located at the south end of the sea. It will cover more than 4,100 acres of habitat project, and the construction continue through the end of 2023. So right now we're currently about 60% complete with this project. It is on schedule, and it is our first large-scale project to reduce exposed lake bed and create environmental habitat at the sea. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to give some, just to show some pictures here. The first picture on the left here is a causeway that goes out a mile into the sea. And what it is at the end of the causeway, there's a saline pump station that takes seawater in and dredged out, because the sea will be receding out. We have to dredge out so to anticipate the recession of the sea and allow water to continue to be pumped in to be pushed into the project. So at the end of this causeway is that saline pump station, and it gets piped all the way through to a New River diversion structure that I'm going to go into a little further. Next slide, please. Oh, well, no, actually, can you go back? So the picture on the right is actually when we're, and I'll show you a picture of the New River diversion on the following slide, but we had to divert the New River around and have it connect on the other side. And you'll see that can only sliver in the middle there. And that is where the New River diversion structure is going. And so I'll talk a little more about that as we get on. Next slide. So this is just excavation along the northern burn of the habitat pond. I'll show you a little better image in the next slide, but all the berm work for these habitat ponds are now complete at the SCH site. On the right, you'll see a nesting island for the SCH project. And these islands are massive. They're nesting and loafing islands that are being constructed on the project. And you can just tell how massive they are just by the big land, the big excavator that's on the side there. You can barely see it there. It looks like a little ant on the picture, but it's a very huge nesting island for habitat once the ponds around it get filled. Next slide, please. So this is a really good picture showing the project, the west habitat pond, east habitat pond, and the central pond there. And on the star there is a new river diversion where I showed the picture of the new river being kind of diverted around. At some point, where the new river diversion construction is complete, which would be done very soon. It's going to be a big milestone here. You'll see on the right, that's the new river diversion. And that's taking, the new river will be rerouted and will flow through this diversion structure. And we'll take in, and we'll flow out into these mixing basins where it'll mix the new river water with the seawater. And then it'll be released into sediment ponds and out gravity flow out into the west habitat ponds that will, or in the west and east and center habitat ponds, which will create habitat for birds in the project footprint there. Next slide, please. So next is our veg enhancement projects, which, like I said, really began this year. It's 1,700 acres at 3 sites: Clubhouse, Tule Wash, 400 acres at Clubhouse, 1,215 acres at Tule Wash, and 90 acres at Bombay Beach West. Currently, we have we're putting down grass bales for phase 1 work and creating stormwater features to take any stormwater. As you know, we've had recent storm back in September, and really doing grading to channel that water where it needs to go across the site. And it actually worked really well for this last flood that we had in December. Next slide, please. So part of that, like I said, is a phase 1 work. You've probably seen the grass bales at the site over near Johnson's Landing at the Clubhouse site near Salt City. And the theory is that it would not the theory, but what it's designed to do is to create temporary engineered roughness and reduce wind speeds, and also protect the plants to create an ecosystem and stands of native plants, and ultimately cover the area and reduce windblown dust. So part of that, like I said, on the phase 1 work is placing the grass bales across the site and constructing swales, burns, and furrows, and then installing the grass bales to slow down wind speeds and also protect the planting that we'll be doing. So as you know, it gets very hot in Prio County and Riverside County around the sea, and so we have a very limited planting window. So we were able at the tail end of last spring to get some plants in, and we had some success, and we're doing some trials to see kind of what's working, what's not. And we've begun planting this year. We're hoping to have about 1,000 acres by the end of the year under construction, with about 300 acres planted and irrigated. Next slide, please. These are just recent pictures at the site. These are some of the plants that we put in at the beginning of the year. And we're still kind of, measuring to see what kind of success we're having. Again, it was a small site, and we're really hoping to ramp up the end of this year, this last month here. We've got crews out there working now, installing irrigation, and into the first quarter next year, and just really taking advantage of that mild winter that we have and small spring period. Next slide, please. So another thing is SSMP Air Quality Monitoring Program, which was developed to complement and augment the ongoing data collection performed by IID. In 2021, data collection began on the SEH site to monitor the performance and interim dust suppression work that was completed in 2020. Data was collected for approximately 6 months and showed that the site treatment was effective at controlling dust emissions from the surface. Project performance monitoring is ongoing with our veg enhancement projects. I believe we have 3 sites right now that are monitoring wind and particulate matter in the areas of our veg enhancement project, and we've learned that we haven't created any significant emissions as a result of the work that we're doing out there. We're being very careful to construct on areas that any salt crust that is built up, we're really hoping not to disturb that, just to keep wind down. And additional monitoring and data collection is being performed on exposed bed in 4 locations on the north side of the sea to assess emissivity. That's shown right here. Next slide, please. So I talked about advancements in our collaborative projects with our partners around the sea. And first we have the North Lake Demonstration Project, which is our pilot project, which is on the north end of the sea. And in 2021, the SSMP entered into a $19.25 million funding agreement with the Salton Sea Authority in partnership with the County of Riverside to plan and construct the North Lake Demonstration Pilot Project. The project will construct approximately 155-acre lake near the community of North Shore and will provide both shallow and deep water habitat, as well as other benefits, such as potential community benefits. And currently the project is in planning phase and discovery, and surveys are being conducted now. There's the county and Salton Sea Authority just made an announcement. They have a contractor on board and they're doing geotechnical surveying now and hoping to continue on with design. Next, we have the Desert Shores Channel Restoration Project, which is a partner project with the County of Imperial and Salton Sea Authority. Salton Sea Authority is working to get an RFP out for this project to design and build it. Then last, we have the Audubon Bombay Beach Wetland Restoration Project, which is a approximately 800 acre project. And it is over near Bombay Beach. And we're currently at 35% drawing there or 35% design, and working to get to 65 and currently doing surveying. And all of these projects are covered in our 10-year plan and will be covered under our NEPA EA document for federal environmental coverage. Next slide, please. And then one thing I forgot to mention is every year we put out our annual report, and our annual report really goes into a lot of detail on all of this stuff. So I really urge you to, if you want to learn more about any of this in great detail, to go on to our annual report online and look at that. There's one for every year, so you can kind of see the progression. And we'll be producing another annual report and presenting on it at the water board meeting, which you'll hear about later in this presentation. And these are just other projects that are going around the sea that are not SSMP projects, but are great projects and are contributing to restoration at the sea. Next slide, please. So I talked about our NEPA environmental assessment. And this is a map of some of the project planning areas for informing the 10-year plan, which proposes to implement a total of 29,800 acres of dust suppression and aquatic habitat restoration projects around the perimeter of the sea. At least 50% of that will be created as habitat for fish and wildlife that depend on the Salton Sea ecosystem. And the remainder of the projects will be dust suppression projects. Additionally, the EAA includes and evaluates actions by several federal agencies. The Army Corps of Engineers is the lead federal agency working on this document. And this document is expected to be completed around March next year. We're just wrapping up. At the end of August, we received over 3,000 comments from the public on these projects to help inform the Salt and Sea Management Program on our next range of projects, which we're currently working on now. One big step that we've taken over the summertime is to look at these projects and create project descriptions and specifics around these projects and understand what the tasks and the timelines might be on these projects. So as we get closer to looking through all the comments and assessing them and looking at what the community would like to see, what partner agencies would like to see, really trying to get a range of alternatives or preferred alternative on how we're going to complete the 30,000 acres by 2028. So this is a key document in accelerating work and in getting some of these projects moving quickly and getting them through federal permitting. Next slide. And with that, I think, are we going into Q&A? Okay, that concludes my presentation. Thank you all.
Okay, well, we just had a good substantial update from Mario. There's plenty of details about this. You can find, like Mario mentioned, find more about this in our annual report. But also here today, we have some poster boards for you with similar maps. And we'll definitely, our team will be available to answer any questions you might have about the projects. And at this point, before we move on to our next item, I would like to open it up if there's any questions regarding to this update on our projects.
Test.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Armida Sierra. My name is Lydia Sierra, Armida Sierra, and I have lived in Salton City for more than 8 years. It is the first time that I heard about Comité Cívico del Valle. So I would like to know who is financing this program, and how much have you invest to inform that community? Because as I told you, it's the first time that I conozco de ustedes.
Yeah, so well, this is Comité Cívico is one of our partners in the SSMP, and how much we're investing in outreach are you talking about? Yeah, I don't have that number offhand on outreach, but I do know that we have been having these regular meetings. I think we talked about, and if you are or if you could sign up on our newsletter, you can get emails on when we have meetings like this that inform the public. And we've had, like I said, over 30 meetings just about different phases of the Salt and Sea Management Program. So that's one way. And we have been doing, and maybe Miguel can speak a little bit more about some of the work that we've been doing as far as getting noticing out aside from the newsletter. But maybe Miguel, do you want to share some of the flyers and the radio advertisements that we've been doing? I know that there's been some canvassing in the Salt City area by Comité Cívico. Like I said, it works as a contractor with the state, and also engages in outreach in informing when our meetings like this are happening. On the veg enhancement projects, this time last year we began. Yeah. The bales.
The hay, but we don't know what is the intention of putting. At the beginning, we think that you are kind of contaminated more. Yeah. Because nobody tell us. We just see the things coming on our city and our community, and we don't understand what is that, why you're doing that.
Okay. So what is the purpose of it? So it was in the presentation, but yeah. Yeah, no, there are signs up at the entrances of the project. So if you've been out to the project near Johnson's Landing, there's a sign kind of explaining what I showed on the top there. So you can go up to the slide there and see it. But yeah, and at every of our community meetings, we've also talked about the projects but yeah, I mean, it's one thing that we're really trying to improve on is really get out to the community and let them know what's going on. And up until recently with COVID, this is our first actual community meeting. We hope to have more community meetings. One problem is there's just not a lot of venues to have community meetings that are accessible, that are ADA accessible. And we're really looking at venues around the sea where we can have, so if you know of any venues that we can use to have community meetings like this, we really want to start getting out in the community and talk with you all. So yeah.
So go and explain more what is happening with all this project.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Maria Nava Froelich, and I am Mayor Pro Tem for the city of Calapitra, and I'm also an employee here with the Calapitra Island Family Resource Center. I'm a director. So I'm a little concerned. I'm happy that all this is going on by the Natural Resources and Comité Cívico. I think it's wonderful. I think that although the governor and Secretary Granholm have been funding some of the money that's coming in to do these projects, and the projects are good. I just think that it's still too little. I'm not saying it's little too late, because at least we see some movement going on now. I think that it would be important to have education for the general public in the fence line communities, Bombay Beach, Salton City, Nyland, have this same project. Also, this educational workshops being held in those host cities. Now, I think that while all this is going on, it's a 10-year plan. But in the meanwhile, the community, the students, the families, the children, the people with autoimmune illnesses, they're suffering. This toxic waste that's coming from the Salton Sea, we're all breathing it right now. And when we've had like wind, we get the Santa Ana winds that we get. And then we get the cold front from the mountains that we say. There's been a lot of wind and dust and sand. It shows up on our patios, it's in our windows, it's inside our homes on the windy days. So where's that all going to? It's going to our lungs. And all that pesticides and herbicides and everything that's going into the Salton Sea, it's damaging our health, our children's health. Here at the school, we have a lot of kids with asthma in all our schools. Right now, we're getting hit with a pandemic, with the flu, with the different variant, and now we have that RSV virus. A lot of kids are suffering. But so I'm really concerned. I'm glad that these projects are going on, but I would encourage Natural Resources and Comité Cívico, which is one of our partner agencies, to conduct these educational workshops. And then let's put some pressure on the state and the governor and the federal government to start funding more faster, because in the meanwhile, people are getting sick with respiratory illnesses, and we don't know what it is. It's not COVID, even though they say we're having a tri-pandemic right now. I mean, I'm really concerned. I lost my niece to COVID last year, not even a year. She died on January 30th. We're gonna have another wave coming right now on top of this Salton Sea toxic waste coming. So I'm really concerned about it. I want to see things faster. Let's get together, county supervisors, the municipalities, North End communities, and let's put more pressure on the state so that they could give funding, so that this be a 10-year project, be less. We want to see short-term goals faster, because it's coming and it's hitting us right now. We go outside right now, we're gonna get hit with that toxic inside our lungs. The particular matter, it's coming in here. It's invisible, but it's here. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you. I'm sorry for your loss.
Hi, I'm Craig King. I'm a board member of desertsurvivors.org, and we're a desert environmental organization. So I appreciate that the collaboration is working to develop wetlands to support wildlife habitat and the dust mitigation efforts. But you described extending the saline pumping station a mile out into the sea in anticipation of further shrinkage of the sea. So how much more shrinkage are you projecting, and what would bring that shrinkage to a stop?
Yeah, I don't know how much more we're projecting. I don't know, Vivian, do you have the numbers offhand? I'm not sure.
Well, we're thinking, so good morning, good afternoon. My name is Vivian Maisonneuve. I work for the Department of Water Resources. So we're thinking the sea is going to stabilize roughly around 2045, but it will significantly shrink. And in the next 35 years, from where we stand, it will probably be about 3 miles out from the current situation. It's a very shallow lake, but the reduction in the area will be significant. But it is essential to build those habitats to replace the ecological function that the sea serves right now for fish eating birds and for migratory birds, but as well for health purposes. We are thinking that by putting habitats, it would also reduce dust emission, specifically at the edge of the sea, where the soil is more emissive. We have finer sediments in that area, and the windblown dust will hopefully be stopped by that. And we will prevent further health hazard for the area and the community. So it serves two functions, and so that habitat is deemed essential to serve that. So depends where you are, because the topography is not equal everywhere around the Salton Sea. It's very shallow in the area around the rivers by the Alamo and the New River, and it's a little steeper on the east and west side of the Salton Sea. The north side also, because of the Whitewater River, it's also shallower. So if you lose 1 foot in elevation, over depth, you would lose probably a mile of sea area that will be receding. But the sea is going to eventually, if nothing is done, the sea is going to stabilize eventually. So absolutely, we don't have all the solutions right now, but there is definitely, with the vegetation enhancement, we have great hope that this is, I mean, it's working right now. We have data to show it. We're still compiling them to draft the report. But we're hoping that as the sea is receding, we'll keep building those habitats. For the 10-year plan, we're looking at 30,000 acres of habitat and dust suppression projects. And then, of course, we have the long-range plan. That would basically, we have the report that's due at the end of the year, the draft report. And then from this report, we'll start planning for future projects past the 30,000 acres that we are currently planning. So
Okay, so we'll take a couple more questions, and then we also have some questions remotely, and then we'll move on to our next item.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lillian Garcia. I'm with United for Justice, and I'm from the Coachella Valley. I've done some advocacy in regards to the Salton Sea and the New River. And I have a few questions for the Natural Resources Agency. I noticed that the Bowman bugs are not mentioned on your report. This is a situation that the residents have continued to complain. It affects their pools, it affects their air filters in the vehicles, in the house. So that's a big concern. Another thing I noticed is the information in regards to the air quality program. What type of monitors are being used, and where's the data, and what pollutants are being monitored? Who is in charge of the air monitoring program, and how much funding is going towards this? Another thing is the water quality. I know that water boards is on the agenda, but my understanding is that the Salton Sea Management program is the one with the funding. So I would appreciate if you guys would work with the State Water Resources Control Board and also with the California Air Resources Board, as well as the Imperial County Air Pollution Control District, also South Coast, all these entities need to be included, and they're the ones that should be doing the water quality monitoring and also the air quality monitoring. We do need regulatory monitors all around the Salton Sea. We need you guys to put out to monitor the metals, the banned pesticides, the sulfur pits. We need you guys to monitor everything. We need to know what these kids are being exposed to, as they're the ones that are the most vulnerable, as well as the elders. I did hear right now that said that right now this is working. This is not working what you guys are doing. You guys are not protecting public health. The Water Rights Order 2017-0134 states you guys are responsible in protecting public health. You need to protect the people. First of all, that should be your priority. Second of all, I did hear yesterday that no documents were translated in Spanish, and according to the order that I stated earlier, you guys are mandated to provide all documents in Spanish, and what UC Santa Cruz did, from what I was told yesterday, they have not provided those documents in Spanish, and I would appreciate if you guys would comply with the order. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe that we're translating those documents as well. Miguel, do you have an update?
Yes, so the first two report outs that were delivered back in, I believe, March and then June, those are both in English and Spanish, and the latest one for the feasibility analysis and summary report, that's the one. It's actually gonna go live next week or so. So there is a report on air quality that's actually on our website. It's a lengthy document with all the data in there. It's for the first monitors that were deployed.
Stephen, do you know what the monitors are? Or-
What? They're a consultant with the state. My name's Stephen Garcia. By the way, I'm with the Department of Water Resources, engineer for the vegetation and dust suppression projects. So we're working with the Desert Research Institute, and they developed a monitoring system called Sandtree. And it's basically a module that you can hook up a bunch of meteorological monitoring stations. So there's PM10, so particulate matter 10 micron, has a sensor for that, has a 2.5 micron sensor, has a saltation sensor, which measures the bouncing dust or bouncing particles on the ground. It also has wind sensors, rain sensors. So it basically is a weather station on the playa, but also so these are not cheap monitors. They're definitely the highest grade monitors. No, they are not at the federal level. And we've worked with the county on that. And that's something that we talk with them about and getting the federal regulatory monitors out here, but that's something that's still being negotiated, I believe. We are working with the Air Resources, the State Air Resources Board. They are part of our Salton Sea air quality monitoring program. We used to have one of their older air quality engineers. He had been with the board for 50 years. He just recently retired. Name was Earl Withicum. He was the most knowledgeable person that I knew about air quality, and we're still working with them. We do work with the county. That's at a higher level though than where I'm at.
That has the most knowledge about the Salton Sea, he's removed from your guys' agenda. You guys can go back to that agenda and see who was the person that removed him.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to answer who removed him from that. That wouldn't be my call at all. Is there any other specific questions for the air quality program? Or, more questions, I'll let, yeah.
Okay, so we'll go with one more question and then we'll transition to the virtual space and then we'll come back.
Okay, my first question is regarding the shrinking of the sea. It seems like you should be able to provide us with a map showing us exactly what the shrinkage is supposed to be per year. I think that wouldn't be a lot to provide. I would like to know if that's possible. You know, if where it's gonna occur on the sides or whatever. Next thing is the cost of this being allocated to the state. Most of the sea is owned by separate entities Moise showed me on the map. So my thing is just like if I am a property owner, but if something happened on my property that caused pollution or affected the whole society in my environment, then I would be held accountable by the state. They would fine me until I fix that situation, you know, to the point where like $100 a day or whatever. And then I would eventually lose my land if I could not fix that situation. So I don't understand why the owners of the Salton Sea, that whole group, are not being held. Why is the state paying for all this? Why are they not being held financially responsible? Because when the lithium is pulled out, they're going to be holding that as their profit. So why aren't they being held financially responsible for the pollutants that are escaping to the community and being financially bound for a period of time, you know, like fined every month or every year that this situation isn't fixed? I don't understand why the state of California hasn't presented a lawsuit or hasn't basically almost taken that land from them, since it's polluting the whole environment, all of the Californians in that vicinity. Okay, next question. Why can't we have trees instead of hay bales? Those things are unsightly. The only pleasant thing about the sea, it's a very poor area. And the only thing we had was the ability to walk and look at the sea. And now that has been taken away from us as a potential to cut down on the pollutants in the air. Why can't they use trees? And if the argument is the trees won't grow in that soil, the mesquite trees, and they have other trees that grow in the environment, they could basically put them in the large 24-gallon containers that would develop trees and other natural vegetation that could cut down instead of the hay bales surrounding the sea. And, what did he say? Yeah. But I'm saying there are trees, and if the trees can't grow in the soil, they have the large containers, which they do near freeways, all kind of places that the trees could grow in there and provide a more attractive, and possibly because the trees grow taller than the hay bales, you know, more blocking of the pollutants into the air. And showing the shrinkage in the lithium, I want to know what effect this lithium, I want to see what effect this lithium extraction is going to cause. Is it going to make this worse? And what is going to be done about that before it's taken out?
So not to get into too many details regarding the state's role for, sure, I think I remember that, but that'll be great. So the number one was related to the state responsibility and the shrinkage and also the land ownership, right? So, well, there were several lawsuits, but we are contractually obligated in the Quantification Settlement Agreement, the QSA, since 2003 to restore the Salton Sea. The signatory of the QSA have mitigation obligations, meaning they have to make sure that the impact of sending the water from the valley to the coast, those impacts must be mitigated. And IID has an extensive program for dust suppression around the Salton Sea. The state, in his role of restoring some of the value of the sea, is building habitat to a defined 10-year plan, which is around 30,000 acres of habitat and dust suppression. And that's, so we do have some phases on a website. So the first one, of course, is the 10-year plan. And after that comes the long-range plan. For phase one.
Oh, no.
Because the objective is 30,000 acres.
That's not enough. You've only, your phase one is only like a little portion of the sea.
That is correct, but we're not even close yet. Our first
Mm.
project is only 4,000 acres.
So you're saying because they diverted the water is the reason why the state is now financially liable for mitigating the pollutants coming from the Salton Sea? Is that what you're saying?
No, our agreement, based on the QSA is to have the ecological function restored and also limiting dust coming from the Salton Sea. As far as the pollutant, we are well aware of this, and some studies are being done by UC Riverside as well as USC, the Heck School of Medicine. And so we're still hoping to gather some information so we know exactly what type of management to implement so that we do not have this impact on the community. But right now, there is a lot of unknowns, the type of pollutant, how do they become available to the human for them to breathe it in? So there are a lot of questions that really we truly do not have answer for. And what we know right now is we're hoping that those projects will help mitigate those impacts, meaning reducing the impact on the communities. But it's very early still.
Okay, I understand that the state is should pick up some of the costs related to the Salton Sea, but how much of the cost of mitigating the pollutants to the Salton Sea is the agricultural community which put the pollutants in there? Is the owners of the actual land? How much are these people putting into this project?
Right, so the state, of course, has a responsibility under the QSA. And
It
so
should
that's
be a
why-
certain amount, not the whole thing.
Totally.
Okay, example, Louisiana with the Hurricane Katrina.
Mhm.
It was the state's fault that they didn't fix the whatever it is that blocks the water coming in. So a lot of homes were destroyed because of that. So
Right.
now the state has certain obligations to fix the dam or whatever it is. But then the people who own the lands, that their actual land had all this crap on it and stuff, it was then somehow their obligation, even though they lost their homes, to fix that,
Right.
that dirt, that stuff, or else give up the land.
Right.
So why isn't it the same situation with these owners of this property that stand to gain a substantial amount of money from the lithium situation? How are
That's-
they allowed
So
to get all this lithium out, all this money out, but they're not responsible for the damage the land is
Sure.
causing?
No, I understand. And I think it's a long conversation that we should probably have after this meeting, just so that we can move on with the rest. But in a nutshell, there is a cap as far as how much a signatory of the QSA need to meet to mitigate the dust. And after that, it says in the contract in the QSA that the state is responsible for the rest of it. Now, the rest of it has to be defined to what point. The sea is receding, historically has been receding, and because of the condition, it will be receding no matter what action is being taken.
Okay, how much of this is the responsibility of the state and how much of it is the responsibility of the landowners?
That has not been defined yet. So
You should just, answer the question. Who gave the water rights for it? Who approved it? It was the State Water Resources Control Board, right?
that's correct. Yeah, I
So
mean,
the state is the one that approved the transfer. Now the state is responsible for what they've done.
Under
Right?
con-
A lot
under-
of people don't understand who approved the water rights order, that transfer of water. And I think that's something that you guys need to do outreach and tell the community who approved it, because the community, as you see, is confused of who has approved that water rights.
right. So, I mean, it's a public document, it's available, but you're right. I mean, there's probably more to do on the outreach so that the community understands who signed it, who agreed to it and how it was agreed to. And it was done back in 2003. So I would definitely take that comment.
And
yes.
they also have authority to amend the conditional orders too. That's something you guys need to inform the community about. You
So-
guys need to digest that order, the water rights order, the 2017-0134.
Right. So, I mean, right, but the direction right now for us, as far as the team is concerned, but that's a very valid comment. I do not want to say that this is not valid. Our direction right now is to do what we can to implement all the projects that we can as fast as we can. And that's what we're trying to do, to minimize impact. So do we want to move on to the next? Yes. Okay. Hold on to this, okay. Yes, absolutely. We have that. Yeah. we should put it on the website.
Can we have another hand over here?
Yeah.
Hi, I am Iron I'm from Bombay Beach. I'm just wondering, these plans, are they based on the current water allocations coming from the Colorado River? And if those water allocations change, and I gather that the amount of water that's entering the Imperial Valley has changed along with this deal where we got 250 million for mitigation, how does that change those plans, in particular the wetlands?
So. Again.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of unknowns. You know, we don't know exactly what the impact's gonna be at this point. It's based on current projections and current water modeling. So I think that's part of what we need to do as part of this EA is look at what the next projects are gonna be, look at the water demand for those projects, and figure out which projects to prioritize based on not only their how close they are to communities, affected communities, but also what the water needs are for those projects. And so I think there's a lot of ifs and you know, where's the water cuts gonna come from? How much inflows are gonna be from the sea? All we can go off of what the modeling is to date and what we know now. And so we can't just stop and wait for, you know, what happens. We have to keep moving forward to meet these goals and our commitments to this 30,000 acres. And so that's what part of getting the EA finished up, to really find out what a range of options are and look at the water demand, look at the area, and see what we can prioritize based on not only the water demand, but what's going to be most impactful for the community. So to answer your question, we don't know because it's not final yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I got another one. I'd like to just tag on what the first speaker was asking. Bombay Beach, my name's Augie, I'm with the Bombay Beach Community Services District there. And education for the public. We got stacks of bales of hay just on the north side of Bombay Beach. Nobody knew what it was about. They kept asking, what's going on? And they started breaking apart. They're getting all over the town. Somebody says, let's plant trees. Well, in Florida, they got mangroves that grow all over the place over there, right in salt water. What's wrong with those? Instead of putting a bunch of bushes out there, they're gonna die. Over the summer, it's 125 degrees out there in the shade. And as far as how much recession is gonna go onto the Salton Sea, at one time, it was something like 262 feet below sea level would be the level it was going to. Now you're saying that it's going to draw back 3 miles from some given point. Bombay Beach has a little place down there. It's called 5th Street. When it rains, it doesn't rain on Bombay Beach. It rains up in the mountains. And that water comes down and creates 5th Street, which is on this berm that was created by Imperial Irrigation District, Coachella Valley Water District, the Army Corps of Engineers, and about 3 other players and all the uncles and aunts that wanted to get in on that plan, put up a berm. And now every time it rains, we get boat races on 5th Street. There's so much water backing up, and somebody's got to come out there from vector control. They've asked for it. Kill all the mosquitoes that are building up for the next 2 or 3 weeks out there. I'm inviting, I got Sarah's number. You come to Bombay Beach and make some presentations like this so we can get some information and start knowing what's really going on, because we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do, is come out and it's been.
You can
virtual
get a hold of
meetings.
me if you want to come out there.
Yeah, it's been virtual meetings to date, but we would really like to host another meeting out in the community out there. And when I hear, you know, the bales and planting trees instead of the bales are an interim measure. The bales are a phase 1 of a larger project. And ultimately the bales get broken down and used as compost by the plants that we put in there under the second phase. So early in next year, you'll see some planting out at Bombay Beach. And again, that is a temporary measure that's going to slow down wind speeds, keep toxic dust from coming up. And again, that's phase 1. Bales are meant to be there, you know, for the entirety of.
Yeah.
the
How
entire
much history have you looked at? Have you looked at the RLC on the other side of the world? Or just right down the road, right down here, we got Owens Valley. That was a disaster. And that's how this Salton Sea is going in that direction. So if you want to see another big disaster, look at Owens Valley. They haven't fixed it yet. And how many years has it been? So please look at something else besides your own ideas, because there's people out there that have been beating their head against the wall trying to fix Owen Valley, and they don't know how to do it. And it was exactly the way the Salton Sea is today.
Okay, we'll go with one more question and then we'll transition. We have a few hands online.
Thank you. My name is Andra Dakota. I run a dog rescue near Nyland. I'm also a Nyland resident. I've done this for 11 years. I have noticed a huge spike during those 11 years in cancer occurrences in my dogs. I supervise around 400 to 600 dogs, including my own dog. That prompted me to do a research on cancer clusters for humans, because it occurred to me, oh my goodness, what's going on with all the dogs? Why are they all getting cancer? And I noticed that there is some public data available that does show that there is apparently a cancer cluster in Bombay Beach. It's very limited data, but I'm wondering, have you looked into that? And shouldn't that be part of this conversation?
I have not heard of that. I haven't looked into that, or we haven't, that I know of in the program, looked into that. But
because basically what I don't like is the language we're using. We're talking about dust mitigation and dust control. Frankly, I don't care about dust. I can vacuum. What I do care about is survival, and my dogs and myself, that we can live long, healthy lives. I know that, for instance, I just looked it up, so I'm giving you the correct data, that on April 22nd last year, we had a health air quality monitoring, the IQ Air. We had 1,043 particles measured. That is 2.5 times what the scale even allows. That is 3 times higher than the worst city in China ever. The worst city in India ever has measured. I mean, what we're experiencing here is most likely the most toxic environmental disaster in our country. And the way you talk about it, I just think it's inappropriate to not name it by what it is, because then maybe we can take action. So.
and more data like that is important to show that, for more funding to conduct more studies about that, exactly what you're talking about. Right now, we're limited with the funding that we receive. We're limited to creating projects that will for dust mitigation and for habitat restoration. So that funding is earmarked specifically for those types of projects, which I know you don't like that term, but that's what we're trying to do, is keep that particulate matter down and keep the dust. Absolutely. We do, absolutely. But
That is basic science. That shouldn't be very hard to educate us.
Right.
What are we inhaling? What cancers is it more likely to cause? What could we maybe do?
Like, for instance, I bought an air filter for my mobile home that I live in Island. There are certain things that could be done to maybe help us to get less sick from it while we live here.
yeah, I mean, that's.
And then we need to know that. And it should be the government aiding us in this. I mean, the government should work for us, not the other way around. So we're hoping that you can take that back and get maybe the health department, the CDC, somebody that should be in charge of the health of the citizens. And in my case, including dogs,
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Just because you mentioned 1,000 something, they did measure, I think back in 2014, if I'm not correct. I did share it with the state and the CARB is aware of it, but it was 30,000 for the PM10 on near Salton City on that research monitor. So it hasn't just been 1,000 something. One of the last wins that we had on that end, it went up to 5,000. And another thing too, just a recommendation, you guys should put funding towards air purifiers inside the homes of the residents. If you get, you'll never be able to protect them outside because of how you guys are working. You know, you guys need to at least try and protect them inside of their homes. And I think you guys should at least fund a few millions to the residents living around the Salton Sea.
I'm going to wrap it up with a comment. I know I already spoke, but I wanted to say that this is not good enough. We need to work faster, and natural resource cannot do it alone. You need to involve the Imperial Irrigation District that just received $250 million for drought. But what's going to compensate for that water that's not going in there? Another thing too, this is get public health department involved, get the state involved. This is a public health crisis. I mean, what are we waiting for? This is a state of emergency. We are living in a dust bowl right now. So please take that back, and we want the stakeholders to be involved. I mean, we're going to get sick. It's already here, that dust bowl that everybody's been talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to make a correction, the IED didn't receive that funding. That was the state, that was us. And so, yeah, I think more awareness needs to be made for that. Again, we're only tied to by how we can spend the funding,
Okay.
and that's to implement projects on the ground. For funding these types of studies, we cannot use that funding to fund studies like this or to get air purifiers. Our hands are tied. And that funding can only be used for these mitigation projects. And so that's what we're limited. But I understand we do need that.
Wait.
I understand.
I have a comment. I feel like you're creating a utopia over a 10-year process at one small section of the lake instead of putting trees and things around the lake that could possibly mitigate the air. What you're doing isn't. All that's doing is creating a developer's dream at one end of the lake. I mean, that's not helping the rest of us. Put some trees up all the way around. And then if you want to build a utopia, once we at least have some hope of something stopping the pollutants getting in the air, okay. But stop what you're doing. What you're doing is not helping. That your 10-year plan, it sucks. Okay, it just represents one small portion of the people around the sea. What about the rest of it? Put up some trees or something to help, do something to help mitigate that pollutants get in the air. And one little section is not doing it.
The 10-year plan addresses communities all around the sea. And so I just want to make that clarification, but I hear you. And it restores 30,000 acres of habitat projects and dust mitigation. Well, that's where we are right now, but the entire plan, we're still through 2028. Well, we haven't had the full range of options implemented yet. No, that's where they're identified. The 10-year plan is identifying projects all around the sea. Where we are now, the project I just shared is at the south end of the sea, only the south end of the sea, to answer your question. Right. Absolutely, yeah. By the water order states by 2028. Yeah, and we are currently behind, to your point, absolutely.
And so you
Yeah.
can actually see on one of the maps, you can see the list of planned projects. So I invite you to
think-
just go to that one. We probably could have a one-on-one conversation, give you a bit more details on those projects that are part of the maps as well. And at this point, I would like to move on to our virtual space. I do see a couple of hands up, and if IT can give us a hand here and allow Mr. Chris Cockcroft to speak, please.
Hi, you guys. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Hi, you guys. Thank you for holding this workshop. I want to ask, your former Salton Sea Assistant Director retired at the beginning of September. I would like specifics on what the state is doing about hiring his replacement, where things stand, where the ads have gone. I think Vivian would probably know, but I'm not sure. But we really need that position replaced, and we need it to be someone who is, represents the best interest of the public trust in this regard. So could somebody please tell me exactly like when you put out the job description, when the thing closed, the job closed, when the interviews were scheduled, and when we can expect a new director? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. This is Lisa Lean Mager with the California Natural Resources Agency. So we are actively recruiting for that position. We've had a few interviews to date. I don't have a specific timeline for when it will be filled. It's kind of I completely agree with you that it's critically important that we fill that leadership role. So we are working on it. And it's definitely a top priority for our agency. And we'll continue to look at candidates, and, you know, hopefully we'll have something to report to everyone soon to fill that spot. But you know, definitely hear you that it's very important for us to find the right leader for that spot to continue this program. So
Can I follow up? Can I ask a follow-up question, please?
Yes, please
Hello.
do.
Oh, yeah. Lisa, I have to disagree with you. I think you guys should have picked somebody and they should already be on the job. I think that letting this drag on for 4 or 5, 6 months is unacceptable in this state of situation. So I would urge that all of you put pressure on the people you work for to get it done sooner rather than later. Thank you.
thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, if we can have our next hand up, if we can unmute Mr. Tom Septon.
There we go. Are you able to hear me? Correct?
Yes, yes.
Excellent. Thank you. So I do appreciate the effort you're putting on to hold this meeting and to start doing it physically out in the community. I think, however, the state management, Salton Sea Management Program did miss an opportunity with the hay bales to communicate that. We've heard a couple of times tonight that they just appeared, and even people who are on the state's engagement committee never heard about the hay bales until we walked out on the playa and saw crews laying them out, and went up and talked to the crews and said, you know, what's going on here, and who's doing this and why. We know that the hay bales were an Owens Lake solution, and that it is essentially coming from there and being translated down to the Salton Sea. I think your state could have done much better by sharing that information with community groups. We could actually go and talk to people and say, hey, the state's planning to put out hay bales. What do you think about this? The unfortunate outcome of that is that hay bales have become a bit of a running joke in some of the communities. And that's unfortunate missed opportunity to actually use the channels that you have in local nonprofits and local citizen groups to get the word out and get some feedback back. You could have done that, and I hope you can do better. One resident talked about trees. I think that does make sense. Actually, I put a proposal for using rows of mesquite trees to stop dust a couple of years ago to Imperial County, and also shared with that with the state. It, of course, has been ignored because it's not coming from Owens Lake. Nobody grew any trees up at Owens Lake, but it does actually make sense. We do have some native trees that are capable of surviving the extremes of this area, provided they have water, and there are ways of delivering that somewhere in the proposal that I submitted. But do take that seriously. And finally, I have a question for Mario Llanos, and that is, do you realistically believe that you will be able to take care of 30,000 acres of half aquatic habitat, 15,000 acres, and another 15,000 acres of dust suppression by the 10-year plan conclusion in 2028? And do you have a realistic plan to accomplish that? Thank you.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, we're working through those comments and seeing what the people want, and seeing all of the data that's come in and information that's come in about things to look at in that plan and how it relates to the projects within the range of alternatives of that plan. And do I think, yeah, I mean, what choice do we have? We have to, right? And we're ordered to get these projects on the ground. So we have to continue to come up with funding. Again, we have $220 million of state funding now. We anticipate federal funding coming in at 250. We hope that that's not it, because we're going to need a lot more to not only implement the projects, but to maintain the projects. And so I don't think, to answer your question, I don't think we have a choice. We have to do the best that we can with what we have, working with contractors and working off of that environmental document to come up with the best range of options to implement these projects fast and with the, inflows reducing or anticipated inflows reducing, doing it in a way that is going to make sense and that the water demands are going to make sense for some of these projects. And so that is still to be determined. I don't have the answers for that, but that's something that we are working through. And we hope to have more information on that in the future.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for your questions. Thank you to the Solvency Management Program team for providing answers as well. Hopefully we can keep on the conversations going. We have a few items on our agenda still left, and I'd like to get through them as well, and be able to provide additional context. Also, what other things are happening. On our next item, we'll be providing a quick update on the long-range plan. This is actually what happens after the 10-year plan. As it was mentioned before, the 10-year plan, it's intended to be completed by 2028. So about 5 years from now or so. And as it has been stated in the past or during the conversation now, we're aiming or moving full stream so we can achieve those goals in a timely fashion. So our next item, it's an update on the long-range plan. This has been a process that, as also was stated during this Q&A period, it was mandated by the California water boards to look at what's next, what comes up after the 10-year plan, what options are there available, what is it that we need to look into to further know or further evaluate the future of the Salton Sea and the restoration for it. So for this item, we'd like to invite a really close partner to the state from Riverside County, Mrs. Pat Cooper.
Good evening. I'm Pat Cooper, and I'm part of the Riverside County Partnership to the California Natural Resources Agency, as well as the Salton Sea Management Program team. I'm also a member of the Long Range Committee. My portion is to give an update on the Salton Sea Long Range Plan draft concept document. Next slide. So I'm going to go through this long range plan timeline schedule calendar. I know sometimes when you're watching virtually, it's kind of difficult to read those, the verbiage in the small box. So let's start with the first box. It says the Salton Sea Management Team convenes the Long Range Plan Committee. And so we started the Long Range Plan Committee over a year ago, and that committee began working on the development of the draft long range plan. The next box is independent review panel determines feasibility of water importation concepts. And so the panel was convened as part of an agreement between the State of California Salton Sea Management Program and the University of California, Santa Cruz. The panel was established to evaluate water importation concepts. The next box, the Salton Sea Management Program team develops preliminary restoration concepts and evaluation criteria. And then in March of 2022, the Long Range Plan Committee reviews and comments on concepts and criteria and proposes new concepts. In June of 2022, the Salton Sea Management Program team evaluates all concepts. In July of 2022, we had the Long Range Planning Committee reviews, evaluation, and scoring of concepts and strategies. And during this time, we also had the Community Amenity Strategy Development, which you will hear about a little later. And then in July, the Salton Sea Management Program team publishes the draft long range plan, which will be on December 15th. Next slide. And so on the left, you see Salton Sea Long Range Plan to be completed at the end of 2022. And so the first bullet point is it establishes a framework for evaluating concepts with heavy input from the Long Range Planning Committee and the public. So this process provided a platform to identify and evaluate concepts throughout the development of those concepts along with the public and the committee. We asked for feedback on the concepts and identified new concepts that were of interest to be evaluated. The second bullet point provides relative benefits and risks associated with the range of restoration concepts. So we compared the concepts with the expected benefits against their expected risks. This is a high-level document that does not have detailed engineering drawings. This is basically an estimate of what we think the benefits and risks are derived from these concepts. And then the third bullet point documents this plan report documents key uncertainties identified by the Long Range Planning Committee and the Science Committee. It conceptualizes new restoration ideas and strategies brought forth from the public and the Long Range Plan Committee. So in developing the concepts and the evaluation, we realized that there are gaps in our knowledge. And some of the gaps include not having information on future hydrology. And that gap makes it difficult to pick a preferred concept. This hydrology gap is something we're aware of and we know we need to focus on moving forward, at least using hydrology information that everyone agrees on or that has gone through a peer review process. This document, the Long Range Plan draft, brings forward new restoration ideas and strategies that came from the Long Range Plan Committee and the public process. This year-long development process will inform a subsequent public scoping process where the state will now transition from working on the long range plan to working in partnership with the federal agency, the Army Corps of Engineers, on a feasibility study. And where the foundational items from this draft report will be released on December 15th and then used to inform all the foundational items to assist in the Army Corps of Engineers public scoping process. So that middle arrow box is Long Range Plan Committee, and public feedback on the published long range plan will inform these areas. On the right side, we see Imperial Streams, Salton Sea Feasibility Study, Environmental Review. So again, the California Natural Resources Agency will transition to a partnership with the federal agency, the Corps of Engineers, and we probably will see, or maybe we'll see, a title name change in the project name. Not sure at this point what the new name will be, but for now we're calling it Imperial Streams Salton Sea Feasibility Study. To start, all of this is to start at the beginning of 2023. This public scoping provides an opportunity for responsible trustee agencies, other public agencies, tribes, and the general public to comment on locations, capacities, and operations of new structures and facilities to evaluate in the EIR, EIS. EIR is Environmental Impact Report, and EIS is Environmental Impact Statement. Also to comment on the alternatives to evaluate, to comment on impacts and mitigation to evaluate, and to comment on other issues lead agencies should consider for the EIR, EIS. All of this to begin the foundational information to inform the Army Corps public scoping process for an environmental review. Next slide. The long range plan and feasibility study timeline. So this is the timeline of the future key milestones. So December 15th will be the Salton Sea Management Program team publishes the draft long range plan. And then after that December 15th date, California Natural Resources Agency enters into an agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And then after that period, the start of the public review of the long-range plan or Imperial Stream Salton Sea feasibility study. Minimum of 45 days, a final timeline to be determined. And this all initiates the CEQA NEPA process, the California Environmental Quality Act, the Federal National Environmental Policy Act, and the public scoping is anticipated to begin early 2023. Comments are submitted as part of the administrative record. And that's it. Miguel?
Okay, thank you, Pat. I'm over here, right behind you. Okay, so at this point, I would like to open it up for a quick Q&A session. For the answers to this particular item, we have James Newcomb with the Department of Water Resources on the virtual space. So he will be the one providing the answers for you all. And if not sure if we have any hands up on the virtual space at this point. Let me just double check. And also for folks that are joining virtually, as you perhaps have noted, there is also a Q&A box that you can use for your questions. And also members of the Salton Sea Management Program team and are doing a huge effort responding to your questions there as well. Also, forgot to mention this a little bit earlier. We also have comment cards. If you would like to submit a written comment, that's also an option for you. And at this point, 1 second. I do see a few hands up, and I would like to start this time with the virtual hands first before we go with the ones in person. So if we can please allow Mr. Tom Septon to speak.
Okay, did that unmute work? Came up twice.
We can
Is it
hear you.
working? Great, thank you very much. Appreciate the efforts that Salton Sea Management Program staff have been putting into this. And thank you, Mr. Newcomb, for leading the effort. We do, as I'm a member of, or board president actually, of Ecomedia Compass, and we have engaged very actively in this long-range planning process on the committee. We have been concerned that the committee process was a bit of a charade in that we were never allowed to see much detail on the 4 projects, the lead projects developed by Tetra Tech. And each of those 4 projects has 2 or 3 variations. And all we ever were able to see was a 1-page summary and a 1 instance map of the projects, and it was not much to go on to be able to make any kind of evaluation. And we're a little concerned that we didn't have an opportunity to truly make an evaluation that was entirely done by state staff. Also, there was a mention of by Pat Cooper of the parallel process of evaluating ocean water import, wherein the panel established by Dr. Haddad at UC Santa Cruz, a well-known opponent of the concept of ocean water import, assembled a panel and decided to take a quick look at 18 proposals, but never evaluate any one of them, and instead create 3 proposals of their own to then hand off to the state to score. So some of us have had a concern about that and how that process went forward. But Mr. Newcomb, could you please answer how the state staff, yourself leading the effort, plans to incorporate what the UC Santa Cruz panel had to say about not doing ocean water import? Their recommendation was actually an in-basin proposal. So we have 0 water import proposals on the table that are at all realistic. So how is that going to be integrated in the report, the draft report that you're coming out with in very soon, in about a week.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tom. Just a quick sound check. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks for that confirmation, and thanks for allowing me to join virtually. One of the reasons I am joining virtually is because during this meeting, even I am working on finalizing the public draft long range plan, and so I appreciate the flexibility of being able to join remotely. And then Tom, thank you for the questions. A lot of questions in there, but specifically you asked kind of a more pointed question towards the end, so I'll address that one first and follow up on any other elements you want me to address. So first, one way that, when I first read the panel's report, I came away with I'll admit, a slightly different perspective than the perspective that others had shared with me in terms of the feasibility of ocean water import. Upon reviewing it, I actually read it as that it was feasible, and that it came with a much higher cost than other potential options that were on the table. And so I think it's important to keep that framing in mind as we, look at the value of water when things are extremely uncertain with respect to our hydrology. And so in terms of how we plan to incorporate it in the long range plan, we are evaluating the Sea of Cortez water import option that was a conglomerate of three ideas that ended up being fairly similar after they all were able to pass through the fatal flaw analysis. And those options were combined in an effort to best achieve the goals and objectives of the study. And so I think as a factor of that, the cost probably rose a little bit more than what some of the original proponents were expecting. And so what we're left with is a project that we think is technically feasible, that's in the long range plan, that could meet the goals and objectives of the long range plan, but that is also on the more expensive side of the scale when looking at all other concepts within the long range plan. And so, Patricia mentioned this earlier in regards to that these are all high level concepts, and we're treating all of these concepts the same at this point, meaning that all of our in-basin concepts were really sort of limited to lines on a map so that we could estimate acreages, the volumes of those water needs, I should say, and things of that nature. But we really didn't dive into any more detail than that. And so in terms of sharing detailed information of the concepts, that's something certainly we can continue to identify in terms of anything that the proponents were comfortable sharing publicly. We should make that publicly available as well. And I will follow up on that and see what we can do about incorporating that as an appendix to the long range plan. But getting back, I've gotten a little away from your pointed question, getting back to what should be incorporated in the long range plan. I think it's okay for concepts in the long range plan to not have final form. One of the things we're trying to do with this sort of high level planning exercise is identify areas of science where we need to, build a better body of knowledge. We've identified that one of those areas is hydrology, and we're trying to figure out sort of the best way that we can have policy overlap with our hydrological models so that we can make informed decisions of, what the most cost-effective, least risky projects are. But at this point, I think the long-range plan is going to stop short of recommending against any particular type of proposal and recommend that for concepts that are substantively different, and so that we can get a reasonable range of alternatives at the next stage of environmental review. It makes all the sense in the world that we continue to look at ocean import options and try to figure out better ways to optimize those for cost and performance. And so I don't, I want to be clear now. I say this, I think it's important that we ultimately get to the most optimal project so that we can have a very detailed comparison of the best performing concepts. But at this stage, I don't feel as if it's important to do that, meaning that I think at this point, it's important to start investing in better areas of science, start investing a little more in the designs of the concepts that we think will best serve our goals and objectives, and then make sure we identify a reasonable range so that we can be intentional about picking the best project moving forward. And when I say that, you know, this schedule on here goes through February 2023. The feasibility study itself is a minimum of a 3-year process. That's what we get to start. But as all of you are getting at, this is a complex problem, and with a significant amount of benefits to be had, and a significant amount of investment to be able to get to those benefits. And for projects on that scale, that planning study can take longer. And so just to loop it back to, you know, it's important that we start on the environmental review process now, but keep in mind that we still need to meet our obligations under 2017-1034 to do the 30,000 acres by 2028, with the hopes that we could start implementing a long-range plan project around that date.
Thank you for that. Thank you
Yeah.
for that explanation. And it would be to the public benefit and the public interest if you would follow through on what you mentioned just now and include as an appendix those projects that passed basic screening and had cost estimates that were very detailed and showed where those estimates came from, because the UC Santa Cruz panel gave us costs, but did not explain how their costs were arrived at. All of the detail of how they got to those costs is still secret. And the panel's final outcome is 10 times higher than even the most expensive of the proposals that they chose not to fully review. And that's a huge discrepancy. And it is in the public interest to know that there are much less expensive water import proposals. The panel's outcome was 10 times higher than the highest proposal I've ever seen. It is completely unbelievable how they came up with those costs. And the same people are putting out an argument saying that the Black and Veatch study for the Arizona water supply from Sea of Cortez, which came in at a well-respected engineering firm's estimate of $3 to $4 million, and then the panel's estimate, published just recently in an Arizona paper, $20 billion. How do they get those vast cost escalations? And it is fair to the public that the much more realistic cost numbers be available for people. And I think the proponents of proposals would agree to that. I, for one, certainly would.
Yeah, and Tom, I'll just respond to that by saying, I think, you know, in my opinion, cost is it's an uncertain area until you start getting into 30, 60% design. And oftentimes the final cost as you get into those areas starts to exceed, but by many factors sometimes, and so there might have been some estimating by the panel. So I would just follow up by saying that I agree with you that the public would benefit from having those proposals, but I would also argue that the dollar figures that are part of those proposals might not be any more accurate than the panels that you're suggesting are inaccurate. And so that's why I think, at this point, for me, it's just like, I hope that we could just find agreement on, given the uncertainty in hydrology, that it makes sense to further optimize, further design, and get a better understanding of what the real cost would be associated with the water import project.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It would be very helpful to the public to have that information, because we are facing a drought situation that may be structural drought. And if the reductions of 250,000 acre feet per year to IID go forward, and if those go from fallowing to being on-farm conservation requirements, we are going to see the Salton Sea shrink to half of what it is now and become so hypersaline, only bacteria and salt-loving algae would be able to live in it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tom. And if if you don't mind, I think we'll go to the next question, but in between that break, of going to the next question, there were some questions in the chat getting at that potential 250,000 acre feet per year of additional storage and how that will affect 10-year planning process and available water. And so I'll just say, obviously there's some uncertainty there because we don't know if if things are going to change in year 1, year 2, year 3, or year 4. However, we do know that if things don't change and that number is accurate and it does happen over 4 years, we're not necessarily looking at additional exposed acres, but what we are looking at is an acceleration of that exposure. And that acceleration is on the order of approximately 8,000 acres that will be exposed approximately 6 to 8 years earlier than the trajectory that we're on, depending on what year you're looking at. And so that's one of the reasons that as part of the commitments with this additional funding and us on the SSMP team trying to catch up to our existing obligation and then trying to accelerate to meet the Colorado River supply concerns, that it was important that we get some serious commitments from property owners that own significant properties to come to an accelerated property access agreement. And I'm happy that our partners have stepped up and done that. And the question earlier was asked of Mario if we thought it was realistic. Obviously we're subject to those real estate agreements, but having that additional confidence built into that commitment is something that gives me confidence that we will be able to meet that agreement, and that hopefully that at a similar meeting 2 or 3 years from now, you'll see a doubling or tripling of the work that's already been done to date.
I thank you. IID's estimates are low by a factor of 2 on the additional playa exposure. It's not 8,000. It's closer to 16 to 17,000.
Well, I'll just say, Tom, that depends on how much on-farm conservation is accomplished, and I think that was built into the commitments in some way. But the reality is that over the next 4 years, there's not going to be an opportunity to be able to accomplish a lot of on-farm conservation, and so most of that is going to have to come, unfortunately, at the expense of fallowing properties. And so I think that's where there's a little bit of discrepancy in the acreage exposure, but that's the number we're looking at and the number that we're desperately trying to figure out how to meet.
Actually, it goes the opposite way. If you take a look, fallowing has a lesser impact on the amount of water flowing to sea. On-farm conservation has maximum impact.
I don't know how it came out of my mouth there, but I know in my head I had it straight. So apologies if I got it backwards, but I thought that's what I said.
I based what I said on Tina Shields'
assumption. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, and so I think I was trying to reiterate that point that it's going to be fallowing is the bulk of it likely, and so that should result in a lesser impact.
Well, you need to look at Tina Shields' modeling, because my modeling says it's going to be double what she's saying, and that's going to be huge. And the salinity of the Salton Sea is going to be such that nothing can live in it in 4 years, other than bacteria and algae.
James and Tom, I just want to thank you for this fruitful conversation here. But we have about 10 minutes left for the time we've allocated for this meeting, so I just want to get through our hands and comments that we have as well. And if we can now be able to unmute Mr. Art Gertz.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Art Gertz, resident of Salton Sea, speaking only for myself. So the state of California paid $2.5 million taxpayer dollars, UC Santa Cruz, and we all know it was a bogus report doomed to failure, which allows the state to walk away regarding a realistic approach to obtaining the much needed water. Hay bales and contour plowing is not going to restore anything, and we are running headlong into a southwestern United States water crisis. You could have taken that $2.5 million and spent it on engineering for seawater import and got firm bids for the cost of that import. But instead, you paid for a bag of lies that told the state what they wanted to hear, that cannot happen. Taxpayers don't believe it. we look at the failure thus far of the 10-year plan. You're not meeting the own milestones for dust mitigation of exposed playa that you set. Originally, it's laid out that you didn't make the acreage one year, that it got added on to the next year. You're following further and further behind, and you have no realistic way of where you're going to get enough water to restore anything. You will not say it publicly, but you consider any water that is put into the Salton Sea is wasted water. And this is doomed to failure. We're running headlong into the worst ecological crisis in the United States, Western United States ever. And I'm hearing no realistic plan on the 10-year plan or the long-range plan. You will not really listen to climatologists and meteorologists of what the benefits provided for Laguna Salada and Salton Sea. You never discuss that. You have so far plans that are doomed to failure, and you're not going to fix it with hay bales and contour plowing. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't hear a question in there, Art, but I'm just gonna say that I feel like some of the statements in there were inaccurate. And you know, I just also want to say that the independent review panel was out of extensive public request to keep that process independent from the state. And that's why that investment was made. And you know, I think I've already addressed how we're planning to use that information in the long range plan. So I'll just stop there.
Perfect. Thank you, James. Thank you, Mr. Gertz. Okay, we have a last hand up on the remote setting. Ms. Jenny Benstock.
Hi, thank you so much for this meeting tonight and for all of the information. I just had a question about the timeline on this last slide here, and I apologized if you already got into this and I missed it. We're already almost in mid-December, and I see that the start of public review of the long-range plan would start sometime around now. What are you planning to do to accommodate the lives of people who would want to be engaged in this plan, but are really consumed by being with their families over the holidays or other such obligations, to ensure maximum transparency and participation? Wanted to see if that was on your radar at all to kind of accommodate the moment of the year that we're in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Totally can relate. And one of the challenges is that you know, we are anticipating a partnership with the Army Corps, and I forgot to mention earlier with the Salton Sea Authority. So the state and the Salton Sea Authority are partnering together as non-federal sponsors on that. Well, we intend to with the Army Corps, and that signing is supposed to happen on December 16th, and we're supposed to release the draft plan on December 15th. I think 45 days is the very bare minimum that would be available, but since we haven't had a chance to actually carve out a project management plan with the Corps or a schedule, I didn't want to commit to anything less than that. But if there were concerns that the month of January wasn't sufficient, I think we'd definitely be open to extending that time period. One of the, if you can see on the slide, what we're trying to do is overlap the review of the long range plan with public scoping in some way, because either avenue is going to get comments and feedback incorporated into the next, into that feasibility study / environmental review. And so we're hoping to wrap the final long range plan sometime after public scoping. So, but we have flexibility with when that end date is. And so right now we have it as January 30th, but if that were a major concern, I think we could extend it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that if it's in your guys' ability, you should absolutely launch any public review process following the holidays in the new year. That's been, you know, that's been something in my own experience as an advocate that agencies have been able to do to accommodate public participation. And I guess following up on that, how do you envision, I can appreciate what you're describing about these overlapping kind of public review processes. How are folks supposed to navigate though? Are you looking for multiple sets of comments? I know one goes onto an administrative record, one is for the state. How do we kind of make sure that we're all well coordinated and using everyone's time most efficiently between these two different public review and comment processes that are listed here? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. We could do a better job describing that. You know, for the long range plan, it's simply if something in the plan that you feel like is inaccurate, an area of uncertainty that needs to be further described, things of that nature. Emails should just go to the Salton Sea CNRA email listserv that we commonly use for communicating on the long range plan. But certainly my advice would be to invest in the public scoping process. And so if there's something that wasn't addressed in the long range plan, a concept, for instance, that you thought had a lot of merit, or if there was a factor, an evaluation criteria in the long range plan that was missing, then public scoping is the place to address that. That's the most straightforward way to do it. But just saying that, we are committed that all feedback on the long range plan gets considered as part of the public scoping process as well. So it's kind of a catch-all, maybe even a little redundant, but we can definitely do a little better job of clarifying with some kind of announcement when we go live with the public version of the long range plan.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that would make a lot of sense to do. It does seem a little bit redundant, but if there is an added value of the start of the public review that's additive to scoping, it feels like just really making it clear how folks can best invest their time in participating would be really, really appreciated. Thanks so much for answering all of my questions, and thanks for everyone's work putting together tonight's meeting. It's really informative.
Yeah, thank you for the questions.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you both. And for the interest of time, I think we're going to move on to our next item. I know there's a lot of questions for there's multiple processes and efforts that we got going on at the sea, and definitely invite you all to send us your questions through our email. Like I said before, we have comment cards here as well, and we'll be sticking around while we right after the meeting for those in person as well, and try to answer some of your questions. So at this point, we're going to move on to our next presentation, a presentation by our colleagues from Better Work Group. It's an update on the community amenities strategies, which is also an important component that you will see on the part of the draft long range plan, and also future efforts for the Salton Sea. So at this point, I'd like to invite Irene Takako-Farr to give us this presentation.
Thank you, Miguel. Hello, everyone. My name is Irene Takako-Farr, and I come from Better World Group. We are consultants that are working with the Salton Sea Management Program to develop what's called the Salton Sea Community Amenities Strategy. And before I begin, I just wanted to say thank you all for joining us this evening. It's great to meet you all in person, and it's definitely an honor to share time and space with you all. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, next slide, please. Thank you. So as many of us know, community members and organizations at and around the Salton Sea have advocated for multi-benefit infrastructure projects to address a range of community health, environmental, and economic needs. However, limitations on the use of bond funding and regulatory, technological, cost, and land ownership challenges have posed barriers to integrating these into the project design of Salton Sea Management Program projects. So recognizing the need for greater investments in communities at and around the sea, the California Natural Resources Agency, CNRA, engaged Better World Group to develop the Salton Sea Community Amenities and Infrastructure Strategy. And this strategy will essentially discuss the broader range of community infrastructure needs for the Salton Sea region as identified by community residents and leaders such as yourself. Next slide, please. Thank you. And before I continue on this slide, I just wanted to say we're going to have one in English and then one in Spanish. So we'll pause here for a moment, and then halfway through my talking points, I'll ask us to transition. So a really important goal of this effort is to respect and acknowledge the work of community residents to date. This assessment has included a literature review of all current publicly available written or oral comments from public meetings about the Salton Sea, as well as other meetings and efforts in the region and relevant reports and needs assessments. In addition, BWG has also conducted over 60 interviews and follow-up meetings with community residents, community-based organizations, local government, state government, philanthropy, healthcare, and education actors at and around the sea. This year, we also supported the development of the Salton Sea Regional Community Benefits Working Group, which is made up of community residents and leaders across the region to discuss cross-cutting issue areas. This working group was really just a great opportunity to share information, collaboratively identify where additional information might be needed, and then identify pathways to realize community amenities, pathways such as funding. So to date, the meetings that are part of this working group have focused on workforce development benefits, broadband access, and community infrastructure for recreation. We have a couple meetings coming up early next week, and we'd like to invite you all to join. These are tied to transportation and public health. And at a future date, we'll also be discussing climate resilience. So my information will be at the end of the slide deck. And if you would like to participate, please email me or feel free to reach out to me at the end of tonight's event. Okay, so on the right side of this slide, you'll see focus areas of the report. These are the findings that we've determined through our preliminary research and review of materials to date, including CBO-led processes. All right, let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So these identified needs include recreation and access to the sea. That includes anything from recreation centers at the sea, opportunities for water sports and other sports, trails, viewing points, bike paths, shade infrastructure, lighting, and also restrooms. We've also identified needs for regional infrastructure improvements to broadband, transportation, so public transportation, active transportation, and roads quality. And then also public health benefits like identified tonight, air quality monitors, air filters in homes and schools. And then the last one in this category of regional infrastructure is probably stable energy and other climate resilience infrastructure. Additional needs that we've identified include education and programming at the sea. And then finally, we have actions to ensure restoration at the sea leads to good and local jobs and career paths. So CNRA is committed to advancing multi-benefit solutions. Although many of the community infrastructure needs fall outside of the Salton Sea Management Program and within the planning authority and funding of other governmental agencies and programs, CNRA is committed to supporting and advancing these efforts where possible. Next slide, please. Could we actually go to the next slide and then I'll take us back to this. All right, thank you. So here is a timeline of Better World Group's process for the community amenity strategy. Our work began last summer through the one-on-one interviews and a review of public comments received by the state, and additionally reports or letters that were received to the state from local community groups. This plan is going to be further informed this month and next through community outreach, which I'll cover in the next slide. And then the plan will be finalized in spring 2023 after incorporating public feedback through you all through a 30-day public comment period. Can we go back one slide? Thank you. So during this presentation, I really do want to emphasize that community feedback is integral to the formation of this document. The strategy so far has been built upon the already strong foundation of decades of feedback that you all have provided. And we hope to really continue this engagement to ensure that the strategy truly reflects the needs of communities at and around the sea. In November this year, the Salton Sea Authority partnered with local community-based organization Konkui Design Initiative, KDI, to support outreach. So in December, KDI will be working with local groups and residents to collect feedback about the needs and desires of local residents. These events will happen at existing community events or meeting spaces through surveys. And then finally, in January, KDI will coordinate and facilitate community focus groups and workshops. So this is another opportunity, again, where we would like to ask you all as community members and community residents to engage if you are so inclined. Please let me know and I will definitely connect you to the right people. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on for this slide is that KDI is also working to identify additional partners throughout the region to ensure that the strategy is informed not only by local community-based organizations, but also directly by local residents and community members themselves. Next slide, please. So before we go to questions, I also just wanted to quickly cover how recreation and equitable access at the sea is being folded into the long-range plan that we just discussed. So, I'm sorry, next slide. So on the left here, we have an image of a mapping exercise that we worked on early this September to identify where community members wanted to see different recreation infrastructure amenities placed around the Salton Sea. The feedback you all shared, along with the feedback from partners like Audubon, will be displayed within the long-range plan to identify where various amenity types can be placed according to the infrastructure needs for each concept. So in the middle, here's an example of a concept diagram that's going to be included in the long-range plan. And then on the right-hand side, this is how we are planning to identify what amenities might be placed according to the different infrastructural constraints of the different concepts that are being reviewed. There will be more maps in the long-range plan to match each of the different concepts that are being considered. And the next stage of environmental review and concept selection will provide an opportunity for more specific feedback on the type of amenities that are being considered and the location. Next slide, please. All right, so that'll close us out. I just wanted to thank you all again very much for your time today. Please let me know if you have any questions or would like to be engaged in this process. My email is irene@betterworldgroup.com, and I would love to meet you and talk with you about these plans. So for the folks that are here in person, we do have a survey prepared at the front desk. Hopefully you were able to grab one on your way in. And we'd like to kindly request that you all complete these surveys so that we can make sure your personal perspectives and experiences at the sea are reflected in our document. For those of us that are joining virtually, we will be circulating the survey through, I believe, the SSMP's listserv by the end of this week. So thank you. And I'll invite Sarah Friedman from Better World Group to join me for the Q&A if we have time for that.
Yeah, I think we're gonna skip the Q&A. Sarah and Irene will be here through the end of this meeting and a little bit after that. So I think we can skip Q&A just so we can move on with our agenda today. And thank you everybody that's hanging on to this meeting. Thank you for those in person and also those online, and to our partners that are still in close attention to this meeting. So at this point, if we can move to the next slide, please. And at this point, I would like to invite our partner with the California Water Boards, Molly Williams. She'll have an update for us on the next year's Salton Sea workshop. And if we can please have Molly. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks,
if we-
Miguel. Can everybody see and hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you and your presentation's up now.
Awesome. Fantastic. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me tonight. My name is Molly Williams. As Miguel said, I'm with the State Water Board, and I'm here with Stephanie Holstage, who is my counterpart. And I am from the Office of Public Participation, and I'm going to be organizing, along with Stephanie, the workshop next year that's going to take place in the spring. So we're just going to give a quick overview of what that's going to look like. And we can go to the next slide, sorry. Okay, so this is kind of the overview of what the workshop is going to look like overall. It's with the State Water Board members. So we have a board that will hear an update from the Natural Resource Agency about an update on the 10-year phase 1 plan of the SSMP. We'll also be hearing from community members and receive public comments at this board workshop. So it'll, as I mentioned, be our State Water Board members, as well as staff members like Stephanie and myself, staff from the Natural Resource Agency, other state agencies, tribes may participate, environmental organization representatives, local agencies, as well as community members and any other interested parties. And this is going to be our first meeting that we're holding in person since 2019. So it's a pretty big deal. We're excited to be able to have our board members there in person again. So it's going to be held in May. All of this is still tentative. We're working on firming it up, and we'll have a public notice released soon. But tentatively, it's going to take place over 2 days. And the idea there is that in the past, the workshops have been really long when everything is kind of crammed into a single day. So we're hoping to hold it over 2 days next year, with the first day taking place in the afternoon and the second day taking place in the evening time to make sure that we can accommodate folks' schedules. And in addition to being in person, it's also going to be on other platforms as well. So kind of like we have right now with the hybrid setup. So we'll have an in-person location, online platform and webcast, as well as an in-person viewing location. So we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. Okay, so we're going to have our in-person meeting with our State Water Board members at Imperial Valley College, so down in the Imperial Valley. And then the remote viewing location will be in the Coachella Valley. I believe we're going to have it at the Boys and Girls Club of Coachella Valley. And I'd like to get any feedback you have on that as a viewing location. So folks that aren't able to make the trek down to Imperial will be able to come and participate and watch the meeting at the remote viewing location in the Coachella Valley. And the idea here is that every year we'll rotate these so that in 2024, the in-person location will be in the Coachella Valley in Mecca or somewhere nearby, and the remote viewing location will be down in the Imperial Valley. Okay, and we can go to the next slide. All right, so at the workshop, we're going to have everything translated into Spanish, all of our workshop materials, all of our outreach materials, and we'll also be providing live interpretation across all of the platforms at the workshop. And we can also offer language services in other languages besides English and Spanish. So if you or someone you know has a language need, you can reach out to us. So the email address is here, but we'll of course have this in our public notice and available on our website as well. But we need at least 10 days in order to make sure that's all in order. So if you know that there's another language that you would like to have interpretation in, please let us know as soon as possible. And you can subscribe to updates on our State Water Board website. There's a shortened link here for you. And like I said earlier, our official public notice with the dates, locations, and all of the details should be coming in the next couple of weeks. All right, and we can go to the following slide. So we can take a couple questions right now that are just related to the scheduling and sort of logistics of the workshop. And I don't think we have time right now for an open forum, but we'd also really like to hear from folks about what topics they want to hear discussed at the workshop. So we've heard, a lot of discussion tonight about things that people are interested in, how there is a need for more outreach. And so knowing what channels are best to reach everyone in the communities at the Salton Sea would be fantastic. So we're very open to hearing from you. And here are our email addresses on this slide, and we'll make sure that you get those as well to folks in person. So Stephanie, would you like to add anything before we take questions if there are any?
I don't really have anything to add. Just add that we're looking forward to being in person at the sea again and hosting this workshop next year.
Perfect. Thank you both, Molly and Stephanie. And we do have one question here in the audience.
My question to you, I don't know if you have the authority or if it's the gentlemen's that were speaking here. Will you be hosting town hall workshops like you're doing here to all the fence line communities? Salton City, Bombay Beach, Nyland, Brawley, will you be hosting other workshops? And my other question is, will you be taking back our concerns to your board? And will they be addressed? Because we want follow-up questions. We want this process expedited. 10 years is too long. The short plans that are going, I mean, they're great, but some of them, we want to be able to provide input. This is a health crisis, a public health crisis, and we want the state to be involved and declare it a state of emergency. The Salton City is huge, and we are living in a dust bowl. Please, please take it back and take it serious. We're the ones living here. I mean, do people have to start dying like the fish that are dying? The species? We're not rats. We're not insects. And so this has to be taken seriously. We are real people living in the North End. Very, very, very impoverished, poor families, community living in the north of Imperial County. But we are part of the state of California, and we want the state of California to be more involved. Please take that back. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we hear you. And we are trying to organize this workshop in a different way than we have in the past. The reason why it's occurring a little bit later in the year is because we have received feedback in the past that there's not enough time between the release of CNRA's annual report and when the workshop is held. There's not enough time for translation. There's not enough time to get all the information out to the folks who it's relevant to, and time for them to meaningfully participate in this workshop. So the idea behind having it a little bit later is that we can have better engagement, we can have better dissemination of information, and better participation overall. As for the, and I was going to mention that the board members will be there. And so while we do, report back what we hear, you'll be able to provide public comment in person to them. And as for the town hall meetings, that's not part of our the scope of our involvement in the SSMP, but that might go to Maria and Miguel.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Molly. And I believe we do have a question virtually. So if we can please unmute, I believe it's Ms. Ludmila.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hello? Okay. I have been trying to communicate to you my research and report through email, and I'm working to get my final report. How you can share my final draft to the community? Because every time I email you, there's no response, and I see a dislocation of what the community is asking for the air pollution and where you plant. So I'm afraid that you don't respond to my emails and they are not being shared with the community. I'm doing as a, as a gift of that I think is relevant it's less expensive, it's less contamination. The air pollution is real, and sickness also is very highly cost that our community is paying. So why you don't share that through the community? Or because I see the other guy that was talking about transfer water, he has his report, but I don't see his report, so I can cross over with my report.
Thank you, Ms.
Are you
Garcia.
gonna share my final report to the community, or you're not gonna share? You're gonna continue with your own plan?
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. And we have received your communications and also your report. There's been ongoing communication with you as well. If there's anything else we can do, we're happy to have a conversation with you as well. I personally, I'm the one that's been responding to your emails. So I invite you if we can have a one-on-one conversation and find a path forward on your request. Thank you. Okay, and with that, if we can just bring our last slide for our contact. First, I want to thank you all, both those joining remotely. Thank you those making it in person. We invite you to keep the engagement going. We invite you to keep coming to these meetings. We are paying close attention to your requests. There's definitely a need, and it's on our best interest to get our projects on the ground. I myself, I live in Brawley, so not too far from here. I'm part of the state team as well. So I also have a personal interest of making things happen for the Salton Sea and for our community. So again, thank you all for coming down. If we can skip to the last slide, and if we can make it bigger here on in-person site. So this is our email address, cnra-saltonsea@resources.gov. That's ca.gov. For any comments, any questions you might have, any follow-up you might want to do after this meeting, the SSMP team is committed of having or enhancing our presence within the community. Just like today, we're hoping to have future meetings, meet with you, also coordinate with our partners that are working on outreach and engagement to bring this message, bring this updates, projects, the community amenities, get you the notices in time for this meetings that are coming up, such as the water board meeting that it's coming up May next year as well. So again, invite you all to keep the engagement, keep participating at these meetings, and thank you all. Thank you to Calipatria High School for hosting us, and you all have a great night. Safe drives. Thank you.